Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
It's good to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at carbon credits,
Ooh,
and specifically how corporations are using them.
sounds interesting.
So we're going to be looking at this report from Allied Offsets called VCM 2024 Review Emerging Trends for 2025.
Okay.
And it's authored by Eduardo Pavia and Jonathan Crook.
Okay.
And they're both experts in this field.
Great.
And it really brings up a question that I think a lot of people are thinking about right now, which is,
Yeah.
are carbon credits a legitimate way to fight climate change? Or are they just being used to greenwash?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are wondering about that for sure.
Yeah, and we're going to look at some pretty surprising information about this, including who's buying the most carbon credits.
Okay, I'm excited to get into it.
So I think, first of all, we should just start with a simple explanation of what a carbon credit is,
Right.
just so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, so essentially a carbon credit is kind of like a voucher that represents 1 ton of carbon dioxide that's either been removed from the atmosphere or prevented from being emitted.
Got it.
So, you can think of like planting trees. That's an example of a project that would remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Right.
And then something like switching to renewable energy, that would be a project that would prevent carbon dioxide from being emitted in the first place.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And companies can buy these carbon credits to offset their own emissions.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is that this is going to create a financial incentive to lower emissions globally.
So it's kind of like companies are saying, well, we had all these emissions over here, but we're making up for it over there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Okay, so this report dives into some of the issues with this whole system. And one of the big things that it mentions is that demand for carbon credits is exploding.
It really is, yeah.
And they found that the company that bought the most carbon credits in 2024 was
Let me guess.
Shell.
Shell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a huge surprise.
Yeah, they purchased 14.1 million carbon credits.
Which is almost 3 times more than the next biggest buyer, which was Microsoft.
Huh, interesting.
And the report talks about how Shell is using these credits to label their liquefied natural gas as carbon neutral.
Oh, wow.
So they're trying to kind of market these fossil fuels as a climate-friendly option.
Okay.
So is this legit, or is this just greenwashing?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this report really tries to get to the bottom of that.
What did they find?
Well, they point out that, Shell's not alone here.
Right.
Actually, 8 of the top 10 buyers of carbon credits are from industries that are, known for being big polluters.
Yeah.
So we're talking about energy, aviation, things like that.
Yeah.
So other big names on this list include Eni, Engie, Woodside Energy, PetroChina.
So these are not slow players.
Oh, no, not at all.
These are the heavy hitters.
Exactly.
So are these companies just trying to buy their way out of having to reduce their emissions?
Well, it certainly makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, if they're claiming to offset all of these emissions, shouldn't there be a way to verify that?
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
And that's actually one of the biggest problems that this report highlights, is that there's just not a lot of transparency in this voluntary carbon market.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there's just no easy way to track how many credits a company is actually using.
Oh, okay.
Or, if those credits represent real, legitimate emissions reductions.
So a company could say that they're offsetting all their emissions.
Right.
But we don't actually know if they are.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And this lack of transparency, it really is a red flag.
Right.
Because it allows companies to, make all these big claims about their climate action without having to actually be accountable.
So it's kind of like saying, oh, yeah, I got an A on that test, but I'm not going to show you my work.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good analogy.
So in addition to this lack of transparency,
Mm-hmm.
the report also raises concerns about the quality of some of these carbon credit projects.
Yeah, so this is where I started to get a little skeptical. Yeah.
Because, a lot of the focus has been on these projects related to stopping deforestation,
Right.
boosting renewable energy.
Yeah.
But there's worries about, are these projects really delivering what they promise?
But are they actually additionally helping, or would they have happened anyway?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's this concern about what's called overcrediting, which means, a project might be claiming to reduce more emissions than it actually is.
Oh.
And, in some cases, maybe these projects would have happened anyway, even without the carbon credit incentive.
So are we really seeing a real impact?
That's a good question, and it's something that I think we need to look into more carefully.
So it's kind of like maybe they were going to plant those trees anyway.
Right.
But now they get to get carbon credits for it.
That's the worry. And there is a growing body of evidence suggesting that some of these projects aren't really delivering the climate benefits that they claim to.
So are some of these companies just greenwashing?
Well, I think that's a question that we need to consider.
Yeah. And this report really makes you think about whether some of these companies are using these carbon credits as a way to make themselves look good
Yeah.
without actually addressing the root of the problem, which is their emissions.
Yeah. So we've got all these companies buying tons of carbon credits. We've got issues with the quality of the projects.
Right?
And we've got a lack of transparency. So we can't even tell if they're actually offsetting their emissions.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot to unpack.
And this report goes even further.
Well,
It actually challenges this idea that companies that are buying carbon credits are also more ambitious about their own internal decarbonization efforts.
wait, so you're saying just because a company invests in carbon offsets doesn't mean they're actually going to do the work to lower their emissions?
That's what the research is suggesting, yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know, there have been studies from Silvera MSCI Ecosystem Marketplace,
Okay.
and they found a correlation between buying carbon credits and, having internal decarbonization plans, but there's really no proof that one causes the other.
So it could just be a coincidence.
Exactly.
So companies that are committed to reducing their emissions are maybe also more likely to buy carbon credits, but it doesn't mean that the carbon credits are actually motivating them to reduce their emissions.
Exactly. And there's even some preliminary research out there
Hmm.
that suggests that actually buying carbon credits might compete with funding for internal decarbonization efforts.
Oh, wow. So instead of investing in cleaner technologies
Yeah.
or processes,
Right.
they're just buying carbon credits.
They might be choosing to spend their money on the offsets instead of the internal changes. Yeah,
Is that something that people are taking seriously?
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is, a leading organization that helps companies set these emissions reduction targets,
Right.
they've flagged this as a potential risk.
Oh, wow.
So they're really concerned about this possibility that using carbon credits could actually hinder genuine decarbonization efforts.
So this is getting really complicated.
It's a very complex issue.
Yeah, we've got companies buying up carbon credits. We've got these potential issues with the quality and the transparency. And now we've got research suggesting that they might actually be undermining real emissions reductions.
It's a very tricky situation.
What are we supposed to make of all of this?
Well, I think one of the key takeaways here is that we need to be really critical of the stories that we hear about carbon credits.
Okay.
Just because a company is buying offsets doesn't mean that they're a climate champion.
Right. So we can't just take their word for it.
Exactly.
We actually have to look at the data and see what you're doing.
Exactly. You need to look beyond the headlines.
Yeah.
Look at what their actual emission reduction targets are.
Okay.
What steps are they taking internally to decarbonize?
Right.
Are they really committed to this, or are they just playing a PR game?
Yeah. Are they actually doing the work?
Right. Are they walking the walk or just talking the talk?
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that the ultimate goal here is to actually reduce global emissions, not just offset them.
That's a really important point. Yeah.
Like, we want to actually solve this problem. Then not
Exactly.
just kind of shift it around.
Now we need to be reducing the overall amount of carbon in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And carbon credits, they can potentially play a role, but they can't be the only solution.
They have to be part of a bigger strategy.
Exactly. And that strategy needs to prioritize genuine decarbonization.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to look at what some of these companies are actually doing to reduce their emissions. And we'll see if their actions match their words.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we'll be right back after this.
Great.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment letting us know your thoughts so far.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys.
All right, see you in a bit.
See you soon.
So before the break, we were talking about how some of these big companies like Shell are buying up all these carbon credits.
Yeah.
And it seems like there are some real concerns about whether this is actually helping to address climate change.
Yeah. It's definitely something we need to look into more closely.
And this report by Allied Offsets kind of raises those red flags.
It does, yeah. They actually say that these oil and gas companies in particular are really involved in every aspect of the carbon market, which,
Right, it's not just about them buying the credits.
Aye.
They're also involved in, creating them.
Exactly. They're investing in these carbon credit developers, acting as brokers, shaping the rules.
So they're kind of controlling the whole system.
It seems that way. Yeah, and it makes you wonder if they're just trying to rig the system in their favor.
Right, and make it seem like they're doing more than they actually are.
Exactly. And that's why, Pavia and Crook, the authors of this report, They really emphasize that we need to be super critical of how these carbon credits are being used.
So what can we do about it?
Well, I think the first step is transparency.
Okay.
We need to know how these companies are actually using these carbon credits.
That's like, what would that look like?
Well, they should have to disclose, how many credits they're buying, what projects they're supporting,
Yeah.
and it needs to be clear and easy to understand.
Yeah, no more of this like complicated jargon.
Exactly. We need a system that's, like a nutrition label for their carbon footprint.
So we can see exactly what they're doing
Exactly.
and make sure that they're actually offsetting their emissions.
Right. And the other big thing is we need to have tougher quality standards for these carbon credit projects.
Okay, so how would we do that?
Well, we need to address those concerns about overcrediting
Right.
and making sure that, these projects are actually delivering real emissions reductions.
And they wouldn't have happened anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make sure these credits are representing actual change.
Yeah, so it's kind of like checking the ingredients list on a product that says it's organic.
Exactly. You want to make sure that it's actually the real deal.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I was thinking about is this whole issue of greenwashing. Like, we can't just let companies use these carbon credits to make themselves look good without actually doing the work
Absolutely.
to reduce their emissions.
Carbon credits can't be a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right, they need to be doing the real work.
Exactly. They need to be investing in cleaner technologies, transitioning away from fossil fuels, making real changes to their operations.
So it's not enough to just buy their way out of the problem.
Right. They need to actually change the way they're doing business.
And I think this is something that, all of us can do.
Yeah.
Not just companies, but consumers too.
Absolutely. We need to be informed consumers.
Right, and hold these companies accountable.
Exactly. We need to be asking those tough questions.
Like, what are your emission reduction targets?
Wait, what steps are you taking to decarbonize?
Are you really committed to this?
Are you putting your money where your mouth is?
And if they're not being transparent or they can't answer those questions, that's a big red flag.
Absolutely. And, we can also vote with our wallets.
Right? Support companies that are actually trying to do the right thing.
Exactly. And avoid the ones that are just greenwashing.
So, we've been talking a lot about the problems with carbon credits.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what do you think about them overall?
Well, I think, it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
I see the potential, but I'm also very wary of the pitfalls.
So you're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think we need to proceed with caution, but, also remain open to new ideas and innovation.
Yeah, it's kind of like any new technology or market.
Exactly. There are always going to be growing pains.
Right.
We need to learn as we go.
And I think it's important to remember the big picture here.
Absolutely.
The goal is to actually reduce those emissions,
Right. We need to be reducing the amount of carbon that's going into the atmosphere.
not just offsetting them.
Exactly.
That's the key.
And that's going to require, governments, businesses, individuals.
It's a collective effort for sure.
But this report has been really eye-opening.
It has,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
It's given us a lot to think about. It has. And I think, sometimes it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of this problem.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. We can make more sustainable choices in our daily lives,
Yeah.
support those businesses that are aligned with our values.
And advocate for better policies.
Exactly. And knowledge is power. The more we understand about these issues, the better equipped we'll be to, make a difference.
Yeah. So I'm actually feeling a little bit more hopeful after this conversation.
Me too. It's easy to get caught up in the negativity,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that there are solutions out there.
And people are working on them.
Exactly.
So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to wrap up this deep dive with some key takeaways and some final thoughts.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So we're back, and I'm still thinking about all this stuff about carbon credits.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, isn't there?
There really is. And I think the big thing for me is realizing that these carbon credits aren't this, magic solution to climate change.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
They're not just this easy fix.
No, they're not. And I think a lot of companies are trying to make it seem that way.
Right. And we really need to focus on the fact that these companies need to be reducing their emissions.
Exactly. We can't just rely on these offsets.
It's like, trying to lose weight by just taking diet pills. That's not going to work.
No, you actually have to change your lifestyle.
You got to eat better. You got to exercise.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with companies.
They actually have to change their operations.
Right. They need to make real changes to the way they do business.
And I think we as consumers need to be really aware of this.
Absolutely. We can't just take their word for it.
Like when we see a company saying, oh, yeah, we're carbon neutral,
Right.
We need to actually look into it and see what they're actually doing.
Exactly. We need to ask those tough questions.
Like, what are your emissions targets?
Mm.
How are you changing your operations?
What are you actually doing to reduce your impact?
And if they're not transparent about it, that's a big red flag.
Absolutely. And, we can also choose to support companies that are doing the right thing.
Right. Vote with our wallets.
Exactly.
And this report from Allied Offsets really highlighted a lot of things to watch out for,
You did, yeah.
like the lack of transparency,
Right.
the potential for overcrediting,
Yeah, these are all really important things to be aware of.
and this idea that companies might be using these credits as a way to avoid making real changes.
Exactly. And, we also talked about those potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah, especially with those big oil and gas companies.
Right. They're so involved in this market.
That makes you wonder if they're really committed to this or if they're just trying to protect themselves.
That's a really good question. And it's something that we need to keep asking.
Yeah, so I think, it's easy to get overwhelmed by all of this.
It is. It's a huge issue.
But it's important to remember that we all have a role to play,
Absolutely.
and we need to stay informed and engaged.
Right. The more we know about these issues, the better equipped we'll be to make a difference.
And I think that's one of the big things I'm taking away from this conversation is that we need to keep learning and keep pushing for change.
Yeah, I agree. And, even though the challenges are huge,
Yeah,
there's also a lot of hope out there.
there is. Yeah.
There are people working on solutions.
And innovative ideas.
Exactly.
So we can't give up.
No, we have to keep fighting for a better future.
And I think this whole conversation has really been about understanding the complexities of this issue,
It has.
asking those critical questions and holding these companies accountable,
Absolutely.
and recognizing that we all have a part to play in this.
Right. Whether it's, making changes in our own lives, supporting the right businesses, or advocating for better policies.
Exactly. So we've just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah.
But hopefully this has given you a good starting point. And we encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring. There are a lot of resources out there.
Absolutely. And the conversation is always evolving.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive into carbon credits.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
And we hope you'll join us next time for another deep dive.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment letting us know your thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.